What's going on, everybody? I'm Jfanano, and welcome to another Wonderlands build video going over my Stabbomancer Graveborn melee companion build. I don't have a name for this build yet, but as you can see, it is extremely effective. So here are the skill trees, but before you screenshot and leave, there's a lot going on to make this build effective, so the explanation is going to be extremely helpful. As you can see, we're going all the way down the Stabbomancer tree for Exploit Their Weakness, Contagion, Alchemical Agent, and Executioner's Blade. This is a pretty typical setup for Stabbo for most builds, especially for melee, so this will likely look like other builds, but then we're going down the Graveborn tree mostly for Faithful Thralls, Dark Hydras, and Harvest. For our action skill, we are using From the Shadows. This will guarantee crits when we melee that'll cause more dots that apply Exploit Their Weakness, which lets us deal more damage. For our hero stats, I maxed out Strength for crit damage and Wisdom for dot damage. Our dots can take some hefty chunks out of enemies' health bars since it's based on how hard you hit with your melee, and then the rest I put into Dexterity, but I would actually suggest going with Attunement so you can get your action skill back a little faster. Alright, now for gear, we'll start with an item that's becoming a staple for melee builds because it's too damn good to pass up, the Livewire SMG. This causes electricity to arc in between enemies when you shoot them, but it also works for your melee. This was an interaction discovered by Moxie. This lets you kill entire rooms with a few melee swings, along with proccing Executioner's Blade on all the crits that chains deal, including the enemy that you're actively meleeing. All those Executioner's Blades allow us to spread our dots across enemies in the vicinity, applying Exploit Their Weakness, while our action skill is active because of Alchemical Agent. All these damage sources stack up a lot, and I've killed entire Chaos Chamber encounters just by hitting the Dragon Lord statue while invisible. So to kick this up even further, I mentioned that we also have Faithful Thralls in the Graveborn tree. This is a global damage boost, increasing all the damage you deal for every companion you have. Now, most people utilize this with a Fear Your Chuck build, and while I do have some Fear Your guns that we can throw as an oh shit button for boss melts or hitting flying enemies like those goddamn carpet bombing eyeballs, we won't be using Fear Your weapons for the most part, and instead we're using the Snake Stick legendary melee weapon. Every time we melee with the Snake Stick, it's going to spawn a Hydra that deals melee damage for 6 seconds. This is going to ramp up our damage incredibly fast because not only are we getting stacks of Faithful Thralls, but these Hydras can also proc Alchemical Agent, spreading our dot damage to other enemies, building up Exploit Their Weakness, along with the fact that we have a bunch of melee Hydras out that are also hitting enemies with melee damage. Really quick, at the time of recording there is a bug with Graveborn's Harvest skill. Apparently when you go through a portal while they're active, they get removed, but the damage boost never actually goes away. This means when you activate Harvest again, you're getting invisible stacks on top of the new ones. I believe nicktews made a video on this. I can link it in the description. Just know that that can happen if you go through a bunch of Chaos Chambers. You'll get some ridiculous numbers. I tried to alleviate this in my testing by save quitting between Chaos runs and boss kills, and it seemed to reset this bug. So back to gear, we are using the Corrupted Plate Mail Armor. This converts 30% of our damage into Dark Magic and increases our Dark Magic efficiency. This combined with the Livewire in our hands gives us an insane amount of healing and is a big reason we can stay alive while in the faces of enemies. I was lucky enough to get Faithful Thralls in this one, which is really good, but I think extra points in Faithful Thralls or Exploit Their Weakness will be good. Both of these on an armor would be amazing, but I honestly don't even know if that's possible. For rings, I stacked up as much melee damage as possible, but our amulet is actually pretty important. We are using the Joint Training. This amulet increases our companion's crit chance by 80% when we get crits, and our companion's crits give us 30% crit damage. This increases our companion damage and our damage output just for swinging our weapon. For our spell, the best choice is the Buffmeister. There's a little bit of controversy surrounding this right now, but you don't need it to use this build. In fact, most of the time I didn't use either my spell or my action skill during mobbing, so you can get away with a Sigil spell or an Ice Spike. Just know that you won't be melting bosses like I showed without this or our ward, which is the Cursed Wit. The Cursed Wit is just really good. 100% extra damage output when it's broken is ridiculous. You can use a Body Rune for survivability if you want, or the Bad Egg for extra melee damage if you don't want to use the Cursed Wit, but the Cursed Wit is just so good. So that's most of the build. Like I mentioned earlier, I barely used my action skill or spell while mobbing, and I only really needed it for crazy boss melts. I would suggest grabbing some guns with wings or Pixie Fear Your guns just in case you have to deal with flying enemies or something. For a game that added and puts so much emphasis on melee and melee based skills, there's a lot of anti-melee stuff you have to deal with. But with that being said, this is the most fun I've had in Wonderlands, and dare I say the most fun I've had with a melee build in Borderlands since Krieg from Borderlands 2. This is literally one of the fastest boss melters I've ever made, and I keep coming back to this build while working on new ones just because it's so much fun to run around and farm with it. The save file for this build will be in my Discord, link in the description. More builds like this are coming along with gear guides, highlights, funny ideas, and more, so if you want to see any of that, consider subscribing and hitting the bell. Also, check out my live streams on both Twitch and this channel. Check out my Twitter and TikTok for memes and random thoughts from my smooth ADHD fueled brain, and until next time, have a good one.